A. No, I'm gonna do it right now. Come on there, man.
We're surrounded by ones of such talent. You know? Speak life, live a humble and meek life. Ordinary day of the week life. Try to search and seek life. Way up, keep your head up and stay up. Even when you're sore and pain up. Never giving up till it's game up. Keep your aim up and focus.
Don't concentrate on what's bogus.
Never stand for opponents.
Handle your biz like grown-ups.
Oh no, it's amazing. The wage of fire keeps blazing. That's why I'm constantly praising. For some of them it's a face thing. So they're gazing. On the street lights.
Them go catch up on street fights.
Cause I'm pretending they're streetwise. And put that into a brief life.
I
I
feel
feel like it's a mystery. How we
keep repeating our history, making the same mistakes as our ancestors.
seems like all of life lessons missed with. It's risky, so keep praising. One day you may find your oasis.
Yeah,
Rise up to the challenge you're faced with. Be your cool and creative. You'll make it. It's basics. People been doing it for ages. In many other cultures and places.
Section 9B, resolution of clearing
On a
banks.
regular basis.
Banks.
So many cases.
Banks.
Let's face it, way too much time has been wasted, building military bases, fighting a war with no basis.
Thank you. Thank you.
Life is sacred,
I appreciate it.
and every baby born naked.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Junior Dog. Right there. We're at section 9B, resolution of clearing bank A. Conservatorship or receivership. Appointment 1. The board may appoint a conservator or receiver to take possession or control of any uninsured state member bank which operates as a multilateral clearing organization pursuant to Section 409 of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation Improvement Act of 1991. to the same extent and in the same manner as the comptroller of the currency may appoint a conservator or receiver for a national bank. 2. Powers. A conservator or receiver for an insured state member bank referred to in paragraph 1 shall exercise the same powers, functions, and duties subject to the same limitations as a conservator or receiver for a national bank. B. Board authority. The board shall have the same authority with respect to any conservator or receiver appointed under subsection A and the insured state member bank for which the conservator or receiver has been appointed as a comptroller of the currency has with respect to a conservator or receiver for a national bank or a national bank for which the conservator or receiver has been appointed. C. Bankruptcy proceedings. The board, in the case of an uninsured state member bank which operates as such a multilateral clearing organization, may direct a conservator or receiver appointed for the bank to file a petition pursuant to Title 11 United States Code, in which case Title 11 United States Code shall apply to the bank in lieu of otherwise applicable federal or state insolvency law. That's under 12 U.S.C. 3398. 1. Appointment and qualifications of members. Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. That's Section 10. Section 10. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, hereinafter referred to as the Board, shall be composed of 7 members to be appointed by the President by and with the advice and consent of the Senate after the date of enactment of the Banking Act of 1935, the terms of 14 years except as hereinafter provided, but each appointed member of the Federal Reserve Board in office on such date shall continue to serve as a member of the board until February 1st, 1936, and the Secretary of the Treasury and the Comptroller of the Currency shall continue to serve as members of the board until February 1st, 1936. In selecting the members of the board, no more than one of whom shall be selected from any one Federal Reserve district, the President shall have due regard to a fair representation of a financial, agricultural, industrial, and commercial interests and geographical divisions of the country. In selecting members of the board, the President shall appoint at least one member with demonstrated primary experience working in or supervising community bank having less than $10 billion in total assets. The members of the board shall devote their entire time to the business of the board and shall each receive an annual salary of $15,000 payable monthly, together with actual necessary traveling expenses. That's under 12 U.S.C. 241. 2. Member eligible to serve member bank. Terms of office: chairman and vice chairman. A member of the board shall be ineligible during the time they are in office or for 2 years thereafter to hold any office, position, or employment in any member bank, except that this restriction shall not apply to a member who has served the full term for which he was appointed. Upon the expiration of the term of any appointed member of the Federal Reserve Board, in office on the date of enactment of the Banking Act of 1935, the president shall fit the term of the successor to such member at not to exceed 14 years, as designated by the president at the time of nomination, but in such manner as to provide for the expiration of the term of not more than one member in any 2-year period, and thereafter each member shall hold office for a term of 14 years from the expiration of the term of his predecessor, unless sooner removed for cause by the president of the persons thus appointed. One shall be designated by the president by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to serve as chairman of the board for a term of 4 years, and two shall be designated to the president by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to serve as vice chairman of the board, each for a term of 4 years, one of whom shall serve in the absence of the chairman, as provided in the fourth undesignated paragraph of each section, and one of whom shall be designated vice chairman for supervision. The vice chairman for supervision shall develop policy recommendations for the board regarding supervision and regulation of depository institution, holding companies, and other financial firms supervised by the board, and shall oversee the supervision and regulation of such firms. The chairman of the board, subject to its supervision, shall be its active executive officer. Each member of the board shall, within 15 days after notice of appointment, make and subscribe to the oath of office. Upon the expiration of their terms of office, members of the board shall continue to serve until their successors are appointed and have qualified. Any person appointed as a member of the board after the date of enactment of the Banking Act of 1935 shall not be eligible for reappointment as such member after he shall have served a full term of 14 years. That's 12 U.S.C. 242. 3. Assessments on Federal Reserve Bank. Assessments on Federal Reserve Bank. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System shall have power to levy semi-annually upon the Federal Reserve banks in proportion to their capital stock and surplus an assessment sufficient to pay its established expenses and the salaries of its members and employees for the half year succeeding the levying of such assessment, together with any deficit carried forward from the preceding half year, and such assessments may include amounts sufficient to provide for the acquisition by the board in its own name of such site or building in the District of Columbia, as in his judgment alone shall be necessary for the purpose of providing suitable and adequate quarters for the performance of its functions. After September 1st, 2000, the board may also use such assessments to acquire in its own name a site or building, in addition to the facilities existing on such date, to provide for the performance of the functions of the board after approving such plans estimates and specifications as it shall have cause to be prepared, the board may, notwithstanding any other provision of law, cause to be constructed on any site so acquired by it a building or buildings suitable and adequate in its judgment for its purposes, and proceed to take all such steps as it may deem necessary or appropriate in connection with the construction, equipment, and furnishing of such building or building. The board may maintain, enlarge, or remodel any building or buildings so acquired or constructed, and shall have sole control of such building or buildings and space therein. 12 U.S.C. 243. 4. Principal offices, expenses, deposit of funds, members not to be officers and stockholders of banks. The principal offices of the board shall be in the District of Columbia. At meetings of the board, the chairman shall preside, and in his absence, the vice chairman shall preside. In the absence of the chairman and the vice chairman, the board shall elect a member to act as chairman pro tempore. The board shall determine and prescribe the manner in which its obligations shall be incurred, or its disbursements and expenses allowed and paid, and may leave on deposit in the Federal Reserve Bank the proceeds and assessments levied upon them to defray its estimated expenses and salaries of its members and employees whose employment, compensate, leave, and expenses shall be governed solely by the provisions of this act. Legal definition of pro tempore.
According to law, Cornell University, pro tem is an abbreviated form of pro tempore, a Latin phrase that means for the time being. The term is usually used with an office to note that the individual serving in that role is there temporarily.
A Latin phrase that means for the time being. The term is usually used with an office to note that the individual serving in that role is there temporarily. All right. Defray. Legal definition of defray.
According to Black's Law Dictionary, not compelled to involuntary.
Legal definition of defray.
According to Cambridge Dictionary, Cambridge University Press, to pay or provide all or part of the money for costs or expenses, defray costs, expenses. A temporary tax rebate was available to help multinational corporations defray their business costs.
Defray. To pay or provide all or part of the money for costs or expenses. Defray costs, expenses, a temporary tax rebate as available to help multinational corporations defray their business costs. So Where was I? Specific amendments thereof, the rules and regulations of the board, not inconsistent therewith, and funds derived from such assessments shall not be construed to be government. From such assessments shall not be construed to be government funds or appropriated monies. No member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System shall be an officer or director of any bank, bank institution, trust company, or Federal Reserve Bank, or hold stock in any bank, banking institution, or trust company, or before entering upon his duties as a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, he shall certify under oath that he has complied with this requirement, and such certification shall be filed with the Secretary of the Board whenever a vacancy shall occur other than the expiration of term among the 6 members of the Board of Governors and the Federal Reserve System appointed by the President as above prescribed. A successor shall be appointed by the President by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to fill such vacancy, and when appointed, he shall hold office for the unexpired term of his predecessor. Codified at 12 USC 244. 5. Vacancies during recession of Senate. The President shall have the power to fill all vacancies that may happen on the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System during the recession of the Senate by granting commissions which shall expire with the next session of the Senate. Codified at 12 USC 245. 6. Reservation of powers of Secretary of Treasury. Nothing in this act contained shall be construed as taking away any powers theretofore vested by law in a Secretary of the Treasury, which relate to the supervision management and control of the Treasury Department and bureaus or agencies under such department, and wherever any power vested by this act in the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System or the Federal Reserve agent appears to conflict with the powers of the Secretary of Treasury, such powers shall be exercised subject to the provisions and control of the Secretary. 12 USC 246. 7. Annual Report. Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System shall annually make a full report of its operations to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who shall cause the same to be printed for the information of the Congress. The report required under this paragraph shall include and reports required under Section 707 of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, Section 18 F7 of the Federal Trade Commission Act, Section 114 of the Truth in Lending Act, and the 10th undersigned paragraph of this section. 12 USC 247. 8. The eighth Designated paragraph amended section 324 of the revised statute. 9. Branch Federal Reserve Bank buildings. No Federal Reserve Bank may authorize the acquisition or construction of any branch building or enter into any contract or other obligation for the acquisition or construction of any branch building without the approval of the board. 12 U.S.C. 522. 10. Record of open market and other policy. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System shall keep a complete record of the action taken by the board and by the Federal Open Market Committee upon all questions of policy relating to open market operations, and shall record within the votes taken in connection with the determination of open market policies and the reasons underlying the action of the board and the committee in each instance. The board shall keep a similar record with respect to all questions of policy determined by the board, and shall include in its annual report to the Congress a full account of the actions so taken during the preceding year with respect to open market policies and operations, and with respect to the policies determined by it, and shall include in such report a copy of the report of the records required to be kept under the provisions of this paragraph. 12 U.S.C. 247A. 12.8. Appearance before Congress. The Vice Chairman for Supervision shall appear before the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs in the Senate and the Committee on Financial Services of the House of Representatives, and all semi-annual hearings regarding the efforts, activities, objectives, and plans of the board. Well, man. With respect to the conduct of supervision and regulation of depository institution holding companies and other financial firms supervised by the board, 12 U.S.C. 247B. Read that one over. 12. Appearance before Congress. The Vice Chairman for Supervision shall appear before the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs of the Senate and the Committee of Financial Services of the House of Representatives, and at semi-annual hearings regarding the efforts, activities, objectives, and plans of the board with respect to the conduct of supervision and regulation of depository institution holding companies and other financial firms supervised by the board. 12 U.S.C. 247B. 1. Authority of Reserve Bank to make advances. Emergency advances to groups of member banks. Emergency advances to groups of member banks whenever we come back. We're at section 10A.